First things first is the issue of our aina, of our poʻe and our lahui. And why is it so hard for a Hawaiian to be here in Hawaii? Why is it hard for a Hawaiian to be Hawaiian, eat from his lands, drink from his waters? Why does the Hawaiian have to rest the Hawaiian? And if the Hawaiians aren't here in Hawaii, where will we put our Hawaiians? Where will we be Hawaiian?
This one, conscious music, we call this one brains. All of them using their most powerful weapon, the brain, no heart. But it's not the same, it's not as simple as before. It's not our bodies, but our brains. They use them for their war, confused and in pain. We don't know what we're fighting for. So they watch us kill each other as we pile up on the floor. So what's the future to the youth of today? Cause I said I'm looking for the truth, but I see them look to the boots and pray. With the YouTubes and Facebooks, them can't look away. Don't let our culture die in our museum display. Close your eyes, eat, came out, listen for a second. Would you realize that things in your mouth every time that you take a breath in? Well, it's hard when your brain washed, your senses got you guessing. If you listen to me truly speak, you realize what I'm stressing. I say it's not the same, it's not as simple as before. Not the bodies, but our brains that they're using for their war. Confused and in pain, we don't know what we're fighting for. So they watch us kill each other as we pile up on the floor. This one designed to get you moving and grooving. Get them bodies to the floor. Drum and bass. This is more than a hesitation, this is just lazy. This is more than a generation, this is history. But don't think that criticization let your roots run deep. All adapting to the ways of the ancients call me crazy. But I think this is more than a vacation, this ruaka'i. As a means to replace the nation that's filling us with greed. 1,000 years since we came here, but in this past century, we've been fighting to be free. But today we're fighting just to be here. It's not the same, it's not as simple as before. Not our bodies, but our brains that they're using for their war. Confused and in pain, we don't know what we're fighting for. So they watch us kill each other as we pile up on the floor. Get up, get up, get up, get out of the box. They're trying to stop us from talking. But out the cups and the mountaintops and the fishes in the sea here. Get up, get out of the box. They're trying to stop us from talking about out the cups and the mountaintops and the fishes in the sea here. Not 200 years since that dumb boss and tea party. Now they're coming over here with the sicknesses. Them are coming over here and them are coughing, coughing. Stopping us in the coffins, coffins. Telling us we're the coughing, coughing. Sorry, that's not me. So get up, get off me, off me. It's not the same, it's not as simple as before. Not our bodies, but our brains. They use them for their war. Confused and in pain, we don't know what we're fighting for. So they watch us kill each other as we pile up on the floor. The word is get up, my friends. So get up, get out of the box. They're trying to stop us from talking about all the rocks on the mountaintops and the fishes in the sea here. Get up, get out of the box. They're trying to stop us from talking about all the rocks on the mountaintops and the fishes in the sea. Not 300 years since they dumb Boston Tea Party. Now they're coming over here with sicknesses. Them are coming over here, them are coughing, coughing. Stopping us in the coffins, coughing. Telling us for the coffee, coffee. Sorry, that's not me. So get up, get off me, off me. It's not the same, it's not as simple as before. Now the bodies with our brains that they're using for their war. Confused and in pain, we don't know what we're fighting for. So they watch us kill each other as we pile up on the floor. Now the bodies but our brains, whoa.
Kawai mapuna kapu kaha, ha'a inu, ha'a ola, ha'a kapu, ha'a noai. E nā kupu o nā kupuna, e mālama ka mālama ka māpuna e. I ola loa e, I mauli ola e. Aloha. Belina Mai, welcome. Welcome everyone. Mahalo for putting your name and your information in the chat. O Vaiao, o Vau, o Kealiʻimakamanaonalani, Shannon Parker Poʻoloa. I live in Hilo, Hanakahi, Waiakea, on the island of Hawaii. O ka mauna o Waiakea kuʻuwahi mauna, a o Mauna Lua kuʻuwahi kai. I love, still claim the waters of Mauna Lua in my home in Kulio or on the island of Oahu. Aloha. And I really love seeing a lot of same names that we've been seeing coming to our webinars. Very, very excited about that. Mahalo, Laura Lee. Yes. More, you calling from Hilo too? Awesome. Okay, Maikai. Getting started today. Next slide, we're moving on to who are we. As most of you coming to our webinars know, we are the Mapuna Lab. We strive to meet this Olelo Noʻeau hoʻi ka opu ai lehua I ka mapuna puna. This Olelo Noʻeau speaks to the lehua eating goby that returns to the spring. We use this Olelo Noʻeau to guide us in our work, to make sure that we're always Naʻau-centered and always returning to the source. The Mapuna Lab is a place of respite for those experiencing colonial trauma. And we are focused on health and healing. And as we're guided by the Ohia Lehua, an endemic Hawaiian tree, we work in reciprocity and partnership to heal the chronic and existential pain of historical and intergenerational trauma with our Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. Viewing the land as our communities and health as water cycle resilience, the lab looks to the cloud-catching, truth-telling Ohia Lehua for ways to ho'i kawai, to remove the seen and unseen emotional blockages to restore the vai-vai stolen by trauma. Here we are aimed at creating safe spaces for co-learning. The Mapuna Lab convenes all those who believe that when Indigenous leadership is uplifted, wellness is accessible to all. And so as with all of our webinar trainings for the curriculum, these are our learning objectives. We engage you, we hope to engage you in an immersive learning experience and identify how addressing trauma through the Makawalu Naʻauʻao preventative curriculum fits into SAMHSA's working definition of recovery. Participants will learn how to utilize the impacts of colonization on Ahupuaʻa conceptualization to understand the root causes of trauma, disconnection from our past, and the aina and the impact that has on our keiki in relation to substance use and recovery. We will also learn how to utilize the Makawalu Naʻauʻao in your professional role and the work that you do. Okay, and so we have an awesome webinar planned for you today, and I'm very excited that I have a dear friend of mine guest speaking today. Trevor Atkins will be sharing his experience with working with youth. And so we'll begin with our same overview and again an introduction into the Makawalu Naʻauʻao, followed with an example of how we hope the curriculum would be used, and then have a closing protocol. So mahalo for being with us today. We're so excited to get started. And as we do with all of our webinars, it's very important that we ask permission, that we ask for your consent to deepen. As we do this work, you know, as we ask that you open up to addressing traumas and how it relates to our keiki in ways to foster prevention at the root level, we know that this is hard work. And so we ask that you take a minute, and if you need to log off, we will send the recording to you later as a part of our toolkit in an email that will also ask you to do evaluation. So take this moment, and if you need to log off, please do so. And I invite Lilinoe Kauahikaua, excuse me, Kalame, to share.
Ahehea keia noa ina ohana. Wa mahi ole o ka aina mai e. Ahela ni vale no I ka makaloa. Heia kahile oe. E pane mai o ila. Aloha e, aloha e. Mahalo. So aloha mai kako, o Lilinoe Kauahikaua koʻu inoa no Hilo mai au. My name is Lilinoe Kauahikaua. I am from Hilo, in Piʻi Honua. I am representing two organizations here today. The first being Ohana Center of Excellence. We, along with the organization that I work for, Poʻoloa, are sponsors of this webinar series, and we're so excited to do so because there's been so much amazing content shared so far. We're really excited to continue to see what is being shared with everyone. So mahalo for allowing us to be a part of this series. So the Ohana Center of Excellence, which you see on the screen now, and I'll put the link in the chat. This is a partnership of our organization, Poʻoloa, which is the Native Hawaiian Health Board, along with the Hawaii State Department of Health, Adult Mental Health Division, and the San Jose State University and Cal State East Bay. And we have partnered together under SAMHSA to develop a Center of Excellence, which will focus on behavioral health for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. This is an online resource for empowerment, education, and support for those that are seeking behavioral health care, including mental health and substance use services. And we provide holistic and cultural approaches for our populations that we serve. Along with that, we provide technical assistance, webinars, workshops, and we also are in the process of building a searchable database for folks that are looking for culturally appropriate resources in their region. So the regions that we serve are Hawaii, the continental US, the US Associated Pacific Islands, as well as Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So we serve the entire nation, and we're really excited for this project. So please check out our website. The other organization that I serve, next slide, please, is Poʻoloa, which I am a program coordinator for all of our substance use and mental health projects. So if you're not familiar with Poʻoloa, we're the Native Hawaiian Health Board. We were born out of the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act, which was originally passed by Congress back in the 80s. Our mandate is to raise the health status of Native Hawaiians to the highest possible level. Next slide, please. We also oversee the 5 Native Hawaiian healthcare systems on each island, and we house a Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program, as well as the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander 3R COVID response team. Next slide, please. So in order to perpetuate our mission as an Indigenous organization, we always look to our past in order to provide the guidance for our future. We look to our worldview. And so here depicted on the screen, we have the framework for the Hawaiian perspective put forth by Uncle Likeke Paglinawan, which shows the reciprocal relationship that Kanaka had to understand Mauliola, or optimal health, understanding that the balance needed to be between the mind, body, and spirit, as well as on a more micro level, the individual, the family, environment, and spirituality, which you see depicted in that framework on the left there. So these are the aspects that are fundamental to maintaining optimal health, or Mauliola for Kanaka Maoli. With the Western influence and colonization triggered this imbalance in our Native Hawaiian family systems, which shift paradigms at that time. And then when we have you add to that the cultural, historical, and intergenerational traumas that stem from that impact of colonization and the criminalization of the Native identity. It impacted then the subsequent generations, and the outcomes are reflected in our higher rates of health disparities. Next slide, please. And the way this imbalance manifests in our communities today is overrepresentation in many different social services, including substance use treatment, mental health treatment, and various other areas of behavioral health, including incarceration. Next slide, please. So the data only really tells us part of the story, but the data more often than not tells us what's wrong. And it doesn't do a good enough job of telling us what's right with our people. So for that understanding, we look to our Ike Kupuna, our ancestral knowledge. We look to our kupuna and all of the Ike that they've shared throughout many generations and passed down. One particular source that we look to is this Imi Kiolama, which was named by Auntie Malia Craver, which means to perpetuate a life of health and healing. And so this foundational work really brought together many Native Hawaiian organizations and kupuna who helped to pave the way for this work in the decades prior. So I'm not going to read all the visioning quotes that I usually read from this, but the visioning quotes that are provided by our kupuna really talk about anchoring ourselves to a sense of place, anchoring ourselves to our environment, our kupuna, our land, our the salt water, the fresh water, the air, all of those things that anchor us, that keep us grounded. The aina being a part of our family, right? And an extension of ourselves, an extension of our ohana. So sharing that, our kupuna tell us we do not need to become Western in order to heal. We need to be rooted in who we are as Kanaka. Next slide, please. So our organization has worked on this aina-based model of an Ahupuaʻa, which, if you're not familiar with Ahupuaʻa, it's a land division from the mountain to the sea. And it's a series of interconnected systems within that Ahupuaʻa. It's a system of resource management that kept people within that Ahupuaʻa fed for generations. And so this model was influenced by white bison and their healing forest model, as well as Dr. Kaholopula's model of social and cultural determinants of health, which you see on the bottom right there. And our artist for this was Kimoapaka, it's a native artist from Hawaiʻi Island. And so what we've done, this Ahupuaʻa model provides this metaphorical and living model to view these ongoing impacts of colonization, of the historical trauma and other risk factors that have happened to Native people, and provides this resonant model of a Native system that's grounded in that reciprocal relationship of kanaka to aina to spirituality, in that quest to achieve collective healing or maliola. So our Ahupuaʻa is a living, breathing example of a thriving, healthy Native system that's all connected through wai, or water, which flows through every interconnected system. And so if the water is not healthy, like maybe it's contaminated by like pollutants, then we are not healthy, right? Because the water is flowing through all of those interconnected systems of the Ahupuaʻa, and then everything begins to become unbalanced. So a little bit about the inner workings of this model. On the left side, you'll see our risk factors. On the right side, you'll see our protective factors. So always keeping in mind that even though we have many intergenerational traumas and intergenerational risk factors that are passed down, our ancestors also passed down incredible resiliency factors, incredible strengths contained within our culture. So on the left-hand side, you see the risk factors being symbolized in the rain. And this is the symbolization of our social and cultural determinants of health that then come down into our system, get washed down into all the interconnected systems. They go through the vai, through our lo'i, through our lokoi'a, down into the water, evaporated up into the sky to fall back down as the rain. And that's how that intergenerational cycle continues. Similarly, as it starts to come down, it starts to impact all of the soil and starts to make an unhealthy space for everything that begins to grow out of that space. And so if we remember that, again, that our protective and resiliency factors are also intergenerationally transmitted, we see here on the right side that when those risk factors come down, they also impact our systems in similar ways, except for one of the issues being that the risk factors are often the loudest, right? They're often the ones that scream, that hurt. They create these layers of or pain and trauma down deep in our people. So as our work starts to be envisioned within this system, we begin to envision the cleaning of this system in order to create more space for our protective and resiliency factors, to create more healthy soil for the next generation of our people to puka out of. And that's on a macro level, we can see that this system is reflective of ourselves, of our ohana, of our communities, of our care systems even. On a more micro level, we can zoom into something like the lo'i there on the left-hand side. We see how those risk factors have impacted that soil, right? They've created that that anger, fear, and guilt and shame, layers of that for our kalo to puka up out of, to come out of. And that's us, right? Kalo is us. If you are familiar with the mo'olelo of Hāloa, we can see kalo as ourselves. So as we begin to puka out of that unhealthy soil, we carry with us that And as it begins to bubble up to the surface, it can manifest as the symptoms that we see today, like substance use and mental health. And we have to figure out how we're going to heal our systems. We cannot just, if we have one kalo that's sick, we cannot just, take it out, right? We have to figure out if the other kalo are sick or how the sickness is getting into our systems. We have to trace up the root all the way up the mauna to see how the sicknesses are getting in. We don't do that and we just take that kalo out and heal it, and then put it back in, it's only going to get sick again because we haven't taken the time to heal the environment around it. And that's kind of what we're doing right now with many residential care systems that are off island. We're removing people from their environment and then putting them right back in incarceration too, right? So we need to do that work in order to heal our system so that we can have more space for our protective and resiliency factors that create our healthy systems. And so we put this model forward. This was something we included in our ADAD strategic plan as a conceptualizing of a new way to support Native Hawaiians within the continuum of care. This is a continuum within itself. And so we hope that this will help all of us in order to support our cultural lifeways and in a system that was designed to support them. And I'll throw it back to Keali. Let's get that.
Okay. Mahalo, Lilinoe. Thank you so much for sharing the work that you've done. It ties in so much to the work that we're going to be doing for prevention. And the link is in the chat for you to look at that model more if you'd like to. And I invite you to do so. So this preventative curriculum was designed looking at 3 frameworks, the overview of 3 frameworks, one being the Ahupuaʻa model that Lilinoe shared about. The other 2 is our SAMHSA's working definition of recovery and our 12 core functions of a substance abuse counselor, our CSAC. Within the 12 core functions, we find our role best fits in client education. But with our SAMHSA's working definition of recovery, I would invite you to next page. Look at, we've redefined recovery as prevention. When looking at our keiki and not wanting them to grow up in that in that soil, how can we best help them through this definition, through how SAMHSA has defined recovery? We look at recovery as prevention. For having hope, our keiki need hope. Hope is vital. They need to know that they have the right to choose and make the right choices for themselves, to be purpose-driven. Keiki need to understand their kuleana to their purpose. And when you strengthen that connection to their culture, it equips them with that drive to succeed. And if you've worked with keiki, you know there's no BSing them. They know they will sniff out the truth faster than anything else. But when you equip them with trust and you equip them with the truth, then that can give them a purpose and a drive to succeed in the ways of their kupuna. And that brings you to many pathways. So this olelo noʻeau, ʻaʻohe pau, ika ike, ika halau, hoʻokahi. So not all knowledge is taught in the same school. And a lot of keiki will learn from different sources, and that's Maikai. And there's a lot of different ike that they can grab onto, whether that's Levai'a or local ia, va'a, all of these different pathways are Maikai, and they're holistic, right? We're learning, these are learning tools. To root them in the Hawaiian worldview also teaches them how to live in harmony with the world and one another, because these concepts are not just for Hawaii, they're for everywhere. In peer support, when you get our keiki in this role, understanding that their role in their own health and their community fosters a sense of belonging that can be very much a unifying factor in prevention. Pilina is the word for relationships, and everything's very relational in Hawaiian culture. We thrive best when we're in good relationships with our family and our community. So creating those positive relationships with parents and extended family and the community is paramount for our keiki. Cultural is, this part is everything. It's integrated in all of these definitions and all of the work that we do. It's the foundation. And addressing trauma, lifting up that veil of silence, talking about things, engaging the family as you teach your keiki is very important. Strengths and responsibilities, teaching from a strengths-based perspective, teaching the keiki what is their strengths, gives them that opportunity to increase their mana and use that as their kuleana to perpetuate those gifts for the next 7 generations. And then respect is foundational. Our culture, everything is reciprocity. You give respect, get respect. You must give to the aina to receive from the aina. And that's all rooted in that definition of respect. So, next slide. Thank you. So why Hānai Ahu? So this image that I created is of an actual ahu. And this image just speaks to my experience with an ahu about the gifts and the intentionality that one engages in when they are in aha or in ceremony. So the concept and title of Hānai Ahu comes from our cultural educator, Lilinoe Kauahikaua, and he shares the concept of breaking down the meaning of both words, Hānai and Ahu. Literally speaking, Hānai means to feed, to foster, to raise. Oh, Kalamai, can we go back to the last slide? Mahalo. And to raise, to rear, to nourish, sustain. And it means also to be a provider and a caretaker. And Ahu, and by definition, is a heap, a pile, a collection, a mound, mass, an altar, a shrine. So for this purpose, for our concept, we're working with the definition of altar and shrine. As done in Hawaii Lifeways, we look to the kauna of these words to deepen our understanding of our connection to these words and the concept of Hānai Ahu as it relates to the Ahupuaʻa conceptualization. When we work in intentionality to look within to see what ways we are nourishing our bodies, that is the altar, what ways are we feeding the aina that feeds us? What actions, behaviors, mindsets, and our livity that we are feeding on a daily basis that nourishes our ahu, our foundation? What of these things will bring us mana and serve a purpose that could positively impact? So balance is also a part of the foundation of Hānai Ahu. Understanding the straddle between the risk factors and the protective and resilience factors as an important component for the duality of life. That bad comes with good, night comes with day, right? There are positive forces and there are negative forces all around us, and that is a natural thing, not a thing to fear. A little mo'olelo about why Hānai Ahu also is very important to me as a birth worker, as an Indigenous birth worker. One of the practices that we support and encourage and teach about is the act of kanu the ieve after a child is born. And this is done to feed papa and to feed papa the honua that was the child's honua within the mother's womb. This is a practice that is very significant because you are planting a tree with that ieve. And that tree, as it grows, mirrors the health and the vitality of the child that is born, and it connects that child to that tree. And if we all did that with our EVAs, we would have trees everywhere. And it's an incredibly significant way to teach that child reciprocity and connection to Aina. And so just this weekend, I want to share that I was given an opportunity to see a tree that a very, very special EVA was kanu'd, and this tree was planted on top. It's an ohia lehua on a little corner house in Pane'ewa. It was a very magical time to see this tree. So feeling that mana and knowing the story behind that EVA and the tree that now represents this beautiful 18-year-old girl who's already 18 was a very magical thing. And so this is a practice that we teach our new parents, but it also ties into creating that foundation for intentionality. Mahalo. Oh, so next is living the lived dream to the disconnect to agency. As we know, as Lilinoe has spoken so eloquently about the disconnect, that the risk factors that have kind of taken over, and how do we get out of that? How do we heal these things within us? Teaching keiki, we're coming from a very micro level. We're very one-on-one with them. We also have to work within the system. But for this particular curriculum, we're working one-on-one with keiki. We're working with them as a hui, as a group. And then, but as we do this process with our keiki, we want to move them through this framework right here. So we start off with whole. We're all whole. Even as children, you're not half a person until you grow up. Some children think that. You are whole as you are at 3 years old, at 8 years old, at 15 years old. And as an ancestral wholeness is also who makes up who you are, as that haloa, right? We are haloa. So that's the wholeness that guides us to the future. Disruption is the system. It's the systemic issues. It's those risk factors that we are born in, that we grow up surrounded with. And these stories of disruption remind us we're not alone. We're not alone in this, but we need to move out of disruption. A lot of us stay in disruption. We end up using substances to help us with the disruption. It becomes, we can get stuck there. So to move us from disruption to ea, so ea is sovereignty. Sovereignty is our agency. It's our ability to say we don't choose this. We want to do better. We want to flip the script. We want to change things up. We want to huli the system is one way ea comes into play. But in this perspective, we're speaking it to as our personal sovereignty. And this liberates us in the value of reciprocal relationships. So ea is also community, which I will address later as I did the last time, but we find our community in this place with like-minded people that help us move to ceremony. So ceremony is also the connection that we have through Aina, and this is where we heal. So we're back to whole. And this is the cycle, the framework we hope to move our keiki through, the story that we want to pass on to our OPO. No more do we want to hear the story of the broken Hawaiian or the stories of our kupuna. We want to remember how strong and healthy, how intelligent and wise we are. That's what we come from. Next slide. Okay, and so it is here now. I invite, time check. Awesome. Our guest speaker, Trevor Atkins. Mahalo so much for joining us. I'll let you introduce yourself. Mahalo.
Kako. I was sitting here trying to think how to, I don't know if you caught that, Kealiʻi, but I was sitting here trying to think, like, how do we transcend the Zoom deal, right? So we can actually connect with one another, because you're not gonna solve these really difficult issues unless it's face to face at some point, or if you find a way to break it. And then Kealiʻi's Kane comes walking in my bedroom door and put this lei on me just now. So I don't know if you've ever been to a Zoom call where the guest speaker gets a lei in person. And the only way that happens is because Kealiʻi lives, I don't know, a couple blocks down the road from me here in Hilo. But that was probably the most special lei I think I've ever gotten, because I'm over here staring at the computer like, man, how do we transcend this? And you did it. I had actually run outside right before the meeting. You saw me run away for put my la'i on, because I don't like to talk about these things or do these kind of things without some protection. And then ahu ia kia la'i mahalo nui. I'm Trevor Atkins, and I think before I say too much more about myself, I want to invite you folks, if you're available, to turn on your cameras like our friend Jordan here. And if if you have a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, Georgette and Lei have already shared who they are in the chat. So if you can't turn on your camera, just let us know who you are in the chat. And the more I can see you and feel your personality, then the more likely I am to open up and share. And I think that's probably my main point today. I was asked to talk about I guess how to engage with young students, specifically middle and high school students. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to share a little bit about kind of where I'm coming from. I think I'm coming from a very utopian place, like almost like a near perfect scenario to work with young students in regards to substance abuse, but also, cultural resilience, writing historical trauma, and all those sorts of things. So I'll share a little bit about the school that I taught at for the last decade or so. And then I just made a list of like practical ways in which I've used to engage young people in starting a conversation about substance abuse. And now that you guys have your cameras on, I can see what I kind of imagine, which is that most of the folks here are much older than me, have more life experience to speak from, and perhaps more wisdom than I can share today. But I got invited, so I'm going to honor that and say what I came to say. And hopefully you can get something out of it, regardless of how long you've been on this earth. Mahalo for having me. I grew up in Ola'apuna on Hawaii Island. Went to school in America, in Oregon. And then I lived in Makiki, Oahu for the past 15 years, where I taught at Halau Kumana Charter School. You're seeing a picture of us doing a particularly vigorous morning protocol in Makiki Valley. But we start every day in those concentric circles you see in the picture. We start every day with Oli. Some of these Hawaiian focused schools will call this Piko or Vehe, where we start every day together, we end every day together. And everybody sees everybody's face, so everybody's accountable. If somebody does something wrong in our school community, they're asked to apologize in front of everybody. And sometimes they're not ready the first day, but at some point, that's how they right their wrong, is in front of everybody, not behind the scenes. They oli 8 times a day. They oli in the morning, and then they oli to come into each of their classes. They ask permission to enter, and then we all close the day together. And I think that what we're trying to do in this school environment, again, this is a public charter school, so it's open to anybody. Primarily Hawaiian focused, mostly Hawaiian students, but lots of students that don't have Hawaiian blood, that just want to learn more about culture. But I think opening and closing together really creates that space to be yourself and to share your trauma, whether it's in class or out of class, or while you're working. And so I mean, Halau Kumana hasn't been 100% successful at healing people, but we kind of take people where they're at and move them forward. And I would say 100% of our students have definitely grown and confronted and embraced the historical trauma in their ohana, whether it's, stuff that the student is enduring, or the student is healthy, but their parents or grandparents have been enduring and trying to release that. You know, and so our school focuses a lot on language revitalization, as well as relearning our history in a way that from a Native Hawaiian perspective. So you folks, I think, are already familiar from what I already heard about the impact of colonization and also the occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and what the overthrow did for people, what the banning of the language did for people. So we try to make a safe space for that. And that allows the students to grow. We also, another way that we make space, and I'm saying this not because you can do this too, because it takes decades to create a space like this, but whatever space you're in, you can take concepts and pieces of these sorts of utopian ideals and at least implement one thing at a time, and that's how we get to a place like this. But one thing that's been really valuable at Halau Kumana is what we call place-based learning or place-based inquiry, where we put all of the subjects aside. And I'm talking about middle and high school, where, you know, you're either in math class or science class or social studies, and you always know, you know, which teacher is for which. We break all that down. We do interdisciplinary for an entire day, actually a day and a half every week. So all day Wednesday, I have my 8th grade class, and I don't have to teach them from any textbook or any curriculum. Our only theme is uka. 8th grade is uka, 7th grade is kai, you know, 6th grade is ahupuaʻa. So we're given this this theme and teach to that theme. And so really it shifts our focus when we talk about interdisciplinary stuff from trying to teach something that's in a textbook to trying to teach values and trying to teach skills that allow students to get by in this world. And so, you know, most of the, I think the transformation that happens is on these place-based learning days. The reason we don't do it 5 days a week is because the state would never let us get away with that. And most parents will always ask, but, you know, where's the rice? Where's the carrots and peas? You know, where's the math class? Where's the social studies class? Because they're used to that. And so we make it palatable by kind of incorporating this interdisciplinary part of what we do in the classroom once or twice a week. We also heavily, I think, rely on overnighters. We do 5-day camps every spring. And so the whole year is kind of building the trust leading up to that, because, you know, dangerous things can happen on a 5-day camp. You know, some of our students sail inter-island on a va'a. Some of our students, you know, go camp in the forest for 5 days with no electricity, no water. And so it takes a lot of trust building to get to that by the end of the year. But that's a really transformative experience. And then the other thing that we try to do a little bit more commonly is just separate the kane and the wahine. And of course, folks that are in the middle, we usually think ahead about how those folks might react to that and which side they might choose. And if we feel like they're not going to want to choose one side or the other, then we make a third space for them. A lot of times it's the office with Auntie helping out, coordinating the day. But there's always at least that third space. But when you separate the kane from the wahine, the space just totally changes, you know. And if we have anybody in here from like Sacred Hearts or St. Louis or one of these all boys or all girls schools, you know that there is value in those types of meetings. And so even if we just do this for an hour, the things that come out for students and for teachers really changes. And so just creating those sorts of spaces when you have a group, I think really, again, opens up space for them to share more. I have a 5-day camp. I've got some students coming in on Monday to sleep over in Hilo. And I already know I've got 8 girls and 3 boys. And shower time is like that sacred time, you know. We're like, no. We're separating for sure at this time. So the wahine gonna go over here, the Kane are gonna go over here. That's my chance to kind of just have Kane time with those boys and talk to them. And then our Wahine chaperone, that would be her opportunity to kind of build relationships in a different way that you can't do when you have everybody all together. The last thing that I wanted to talk about at Halau Kumana, and it only lasted maybe a year or two before the principle changed and the whole thing changed, but we implemented this really, I thought, innovative thing called monthly health days. So we took one Friday every month and just said, we're going to throw out all the classes. We're not going to have classes. We're just going to do health stuff. And we took everybody in the school and, you know, including the principal, the secretary, the office lady, the EA, the bus driver, you know, I mean, everybody had a role. Everybody was asked, what do you want to teach with regard to health, with regard to Mauli'ola? And everybody figured something out. You know, some people are like, oh, I'll teach smoothies because I like smoothies. Oh, I'm gonna do, you know, how to do a workout. And everybody had something to offer. Nobody, of course, signed up for the sex talk. So I ended up having to do the sex talk, which was, I think I was very, very nervous because, you know, there's a lot of lines you can cross and boundaries you can cross with students with regard to that, as well as substance abuse. But we all encourage each other to just kind of stick to the script. You know, don't get too far off topic, especially if it's just you and the students. And that ended up being just, after the new principal came in and got rid of it, they talked about health days for years. Just this idea that like health is so important, we would cancel our classes for it, you know? And for those of you that get to pull a student out of class, I think it's similar, you know, like they love coming to get out of class because somebody's acknowledging that health could possibly be more important than Algebra 2. And I'm an Algebra 2 teacher, and I say that all the time. Your health is much more important than Algebra 2. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna kind of run through this a little bit quick because I don't want to go over time, but I had the fortune of being at Halau Kumana for this time. And of course, I just transferred to another Hawaiian charter school that works in a similar way. But I just wanted to share, like, a lot of times, especially non-Hawaiian folks or folks that just moved here feel like, well, you know, I'm not Hawaiian. How do I bring in culture? Do I need like a lauhala mat, or like should I bring in somebody to pound poi, or do I need a Hawaiian musician to create a Hawaiian space? And to me, that's all like gravy and spices and sprinkles on top. But what makes a space a Hawaiian space is the same thing that makes any cultural space a cultural space. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Hawaiian specifically. If you go to Native America, or you go to Aotearoa, or if you even go to Native folks in Europe, it's always the same practices. It's basically the presence of protocol as opposed to the absence of protocol. And so just a few protocol that we're used to at our school that might not be the same in your school or your community, but that might apply to whoever you're working with. And this, again, this works for just about every culture, is make sure that your space is maiau, that it's clean. That's an important way to meet a student where they're at. They need to know that you have it together. Just like the graphic of the lo'i that Lilinoe shared, you know, you have the dirty lo'i and you have the clean lo'i. It's hard to teach or to share or to make any progress in a dirty lo'i. You got to invite them to the clean lo'i so they can see what maiau looks like, the goal, where they want to get to. They want to get to a healthy place. You have to be makawalu, right? You have to be on time. You have to be ready. You have to have the slippers lined up, the chair ready, or the seat ready, or the space ready, whatever it is. But you know, sometimes we ignore this and we just jump right in and like, okay, let's talk about your trauma, or let's talk about, you know, you getting suspended. And it's like, hold on, let's make sure we're ready. Did we greet each other, right? So aloha, did you start in a nice way? Even when a kid is in trouble, you can still start in a nice way, right? You can, my wife calls it a shit sandwich, right? Or you know, you at least start nice and end nice, even if the middle is no good. If you have aloha, then you should express that from the get-go and make sure that the student loves you. Sometimes I just straight up, you know, if I gotta deliver some bad news, I start with, you know, I love you, right? You know, that's why we're talking about this, right? I wouldn't be talking to you about this heva thing, about this bad thing, if I didn't love you. I would have just been ignoring you, but I'm here because I love you. Now let's get into it. And then, go ahead. And then it may or may not apply in your space, but food is important. So if you have the opportunity to share food, right? You're not necessarily going to be able to have imu and pull out the pig and pull out the lomi salmon for one meeting with a student or a child. But even just if you have like the lihimoi on a side and you offer that to share before you get started, like that's kind of a recreation of a cultural space, right? No, lihimoi is not a Hawaiian thing. And eating inside is not necessarily, you know, eating in an office is not necessarily a Hawaiian thing, but sharing food is important. And so if you do have the time to make that sort of space, I think that's ho'ihi, that creates sacredness in your folk space. And then mo'okuauhau is a big fancy word for our genealogy. And you don't necessarily need to go that deep into someone's genealogy when you're working with them, but it's important to ask them, hey, how's your dad? How's your mom? And if you don't know their mom or the dad, hey, what's your mom's name? What does your mom do? Where do you folks live? You know, like establishing just the fact that I care about you, and not only you, but I care about your family. And so before we get into this, I want to know what's going on. And then a few more things, just manawa kupono. I had somebody tell me tell the group in a meeting yesterday in a conference. She said, you know, I would trust nobody in this room would cut off a kupuna before they're done talking because the time is up. And so I think most folks in the room here, we know that you cannot necessarily end right on time all the time. Sometimes you need to let the thing play out. And then sometimes you do need to be timely, particularly when you're getting started. And so I think manawa kupono is not just be on time, but be cognizant of when to focus on time and when to not focus on time. And then I'm not going to get into the last two because I think Lilinoe did a good job of just covering the idea of, like, you know, the whole idea of a functioning lo'i is to make sure the water flows. And so your job is to remove the things that are keeping it from flowing. And if your kahawai, your awai is flowing, then that allows them to flow too and pull things out of their stream so that they can begin to share what they need to share. Last slide, I think so. Just a couple more tools. I think I talked about some or maybe all of these, but you have to build trust first, always. If you don't have trust with the student, then you're not going anywhere. A lot of times we maybe like think we can do that later on because we need to address something else right away, right now. But if they don't trust you, you're not going anywhere. And I think most of the folks here know that. But I did see recently, you know, someone that came into one of our schools and you know, started trying to lay down the law before they established that trust with the students. I can yell at my students. I can make them do push-ups. I can make them do hard labor because they know that I love them, and they know that I trust them and they trust me, and that ultimately we're not here to hurt each other. We're here to help each other. If you don't have that trust, don't move on to steps B, C, D, E, F, because all that matters is trust. The founder of all of our Hawaiian charter schools, Auntie Ku Kahakalau, her phrase is education with aloha, right? And aloha, I think, often gets defined as love, but also translates as trust, right? Because everyone that you love, to some extent, you trust. You have some level of trust for. Everyone that you trust, you have some level of love for. And so if you don't establish that aloha, then, you know, throw everything else out and just work on that. Also, I've had success in kind of getting to be real with my students. And a lot of that has to do with breaking the fourth wall that the acting world talks about, how, you know, most of the time when they're talking in a movie, they're talking to each other. But we're just watching a Mike Myers movie, right? He loves to turn to the camera and be like, hey, did you catch that? You gotta kind of break out of the, like, you know, I'm a counselor, you're a student, or, you know, I'm a service coordinator and you're a child in welfare services, or you gotta break that down and get to the human level. One way that I always try to do that is by talking about myself first. Instead of asking them to be real with me, I try to be real with them. And kind of skipping down to the bottom, you know, I guess if the tone is set, if I feel like it's a safe place for me to open up with my own personal stories are always the most valuable, because, you know, if you tell them don't do drugs, but they don't know whether you ever did drugs or didn't do drugs, or whether you grew up around it, or if they don't know anything about you, they're not going to listen to anything you have to say. And so the best way for me to open up is always to share personal stories. And again, I have to trust them. I have to break that wall down. I have to set the tone. I don't want kane and wahine at the same time, right? If I'm working with one, that's best. If I'm working with more than one, I've established trust over many months already. I usually gonna only work with the kane. There's been times when I've worked just with the wahine. And my personal stories, I get to make up whatever is the truth. But outside of my own personal experience, I stick to the facts, right? So I'm not gonna be making up numbers and data on drug use and abuse. You know, I try not to. I try to separate opinion from fact when it comes to that. But when it's a personal story, I can share whatever I want to share. And you know, for me, personally, I haven't experienced substance abuse, but I think almost all of us probably have experienced it through family members, if not our own selves. And so I have those stories to rely on. And I think I have permission from those folks, because they're, for the most part, all in recovery and want people to hear their stories. And so by bringing their stories into it, not only am I helping to make a safe space for the child or the student, but I'm also honoring the process that my family members are going through, right? Every time I bring up my cousin in recovery, it makes him feel better about being in recovery, because, if he mess up, he cannot be part of the story anymore, you know? So, and then just the final caveat on the screen is, you know, be aware that these stories could be used against you. And so you're only going to share the level to which you've built that trust. Yeah, you've built that aloha. But anyway, I hope this was relevant to the group, and I hope this was useful. Again, I'm just speaking as a young teacher who works with middle school students a lot and some high school students, and had some breakthroughs. And I know that you all come from you're in different positions, in different organizations, in different communities. But I'm hoping at least something I said resonated with you or reminded you of something that you already know, and gives you a tool that you can carry on. I forgot I had one more slide. I was just thinking, I made a list of like entry points. If you're like, you know, if you're ever having a hard time getting to the meat of it, you know, like the thing you really want to talk about. Someone just reminded me that going for a walk with somebody is like one of the best ways to open up conversation. Just there's something about walking together that makes people want to share. Or I'll ask if I need to talk, if I really feel like, oh, this boy is in trouble. This boy is like on the verge of something. I'll have them come pull weeds with me, right? Or I'll separate them up for the group. You know, hey, you guys are gonna go over there. This one, come help me over here. Have them pull weeds or carry something to the car, or, you know, just separate them out in a kind way, so that you have the opportunity to go a little bit deeper. I already mentioned asking about their family, asking about their home. You know, hey, do you have any dogs? What's your bedroom like? You have to share with your siblings or what? You know, oh, how is your siblings? Everybody wants to talk about siblings, you know. Oh, you don't have any siblings? Oh, do you wish you had siblings? I mean, those are easy entry point conversations to get to the deeper stuff. I like to hear about what their parents are good at or what their parents do, because I think that as much as the public school system tries to distract us into thinking we can do whatever we want when we grow up, the reality is that we usually do what our parents do. And we either do the good things our parents do or the bad things. And so I try to focus on what are the things that your dad's good at? What are the things that your mom is good at? Because that's what lives inside of you. And then, you know, if I don't feel right asking a child about their substance abuse, I'll beat around the bush by talking about the parents, you know? So like, okay, I think this student is using this drug. I'm not gonna just ask them flat out. I might ask, oh, is that in your household? You know, are you around that a lot? And that usually kind of, you know, massages them into sharing as much as they want to share. Before I go into a conversation with a student, I've already decided if my angle with this student is abstinence or moderation. You know, I should know the parents well enough to where, okay, are they gonna be, you know, is this child more in a space where like they're trying to never do a particular drug, or they're in a space where they're already around it, they probably tried it, and the talk that we're about to have is really about moderation or about control of the situation. You know, so I know ahead of time what I want to talk about. Do I want to talk about don't ever do it? Or do I want to talk about, hey, there's a good chance you're already doing this. Let's try and figure out a way out or a way to control it. And if I one last thing is, I'm sure you know this, if you're sitting with a student, especially a middle school student or 9th or 10th grade, 7th through 10th grade, no matter what you say, this is the look on their face. And so if you're an amateur, you're wondering whether they're hearing anything you're saying. Okay? Well, if you're teaching Algebra 2, they're not hearing anything you're saying. If you're talking about drugs and alcohol, they are hanging on every single word because they are very curious what somebody has to say other than mom and dad. They've heard mom and dad's spiel. They're tired of it. But if a teacher or a counselor or a you know, whatever you are, somebody else besides mom and dad wants to talk about drugs and alcohol, they're sitting there with a blank face and they're hanging on every single word you say. So just keep the tape rolling because they want to hear it. And even if they never say anything back to you, they're taking it all in because you're somebody new. And if they trust you, then they trust what you have to say. Mahalo Kealiʻi for having me. I so appreciate getting to share a little bit about some of the things we do in the classroom besides math and science. And mahalo to you all for turning on your cameras. And if you could not, a'ole pilikia, no big deal. I hope you got something out of that. And up to you, Kealiʻi, if you want to do Q&A or if you want to wrap up.
Oh, mahalo nui We usually do Q&A towards the end. If anyone does have questions, you can put them in the chat. We can address it after the webinar is done. But you had me laughing, you had me crying. This was really, really profound. And I mahalo you so much for just, I knew asking you, we were gonna get an actual view into what our keiki are going through, what it's like to teach them, and just a very real insight to this role as an educator that you brought. And I am so, so thankful for you. Mahalo. We're now actually at a break, which is, I think is a great time. So, wow, I don't know, my Naʻauʻao is so full right now. I'm just loving this. So here's our break. I'm gonna invite our awesome Jack to just talk about our word search and how you can annotate to engage in the word search during our break.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much, Kea. So basically for the word search, we have a list of a bunch of words that are relevant to today's training, and we're gonna search for them. So at the top of your screen, you should see a green bar that says you are viewing the Annalise screen. Right next to that on the right side, there is a little gray bar that says view options. Go all the way down almost to the bottom, and right below exit full screen and above mute the Annalise computer sound, there's a button that says annotate. So if you click on that, you should be able to draw on the screen and highlight any of the words that you find. So yeah, go for it.
Mahalo, Jack. So we'll take about as long of a break as this song is, which is like a little under 5 minutes. We're doing good on time. We're a little over, but that was so so amazing. But yeah, mahalo nui. Enjoy the word search, and the mele will be back in a few minutes.
Protect this land. We are rich soldiers, fight hand in hand. We through it conquerors, my Hawaiʻi you can never take away. We teach our keiki, e aloha aina. Protect this land. We are rich warriors, fight hand in hand. We through it conquerors, my Hawaiʻi you can never take away. I look up at another high rise. Too much people in the city. There for the cup with the sweet, sweet wine. 2020, what a pity. And now the price is going sky high. A little harder for my family. What will we do for our little island to save our future generation? We are the roots. We are this Aina. Protect this land. We are rich soldiers, fight hand in hand. We through it conquerors, my Hawaiʻi you can never take away. We teach our keiki, e aloha aina. Protect this land. We are rich warriors, fight hand in hand. We through it conquerors, my Hawaiʻi you can never take away. Yeah, Mr. Money Man, with your money plan, tell me who are you? I'm trying to understand, really the best I can, but I ain't buying it true, cause you stole everything my people work for. Stole all this land we can hold. So let me get this message through your head, my Hawaii you can never take away. We are the roots, we are this Aina. Protect this land. We are rich soldiers, fight hand in hand. We through it conquerors, my Hawaiʻi you can never take away. We teach our keiki, e aloha aina. Protect this land. We are rich warriors, fight hand in hand. We through it conquerors, my Hawaiʻi you can never take away. Umai you can never take away.
Yay. Wow, you guys got it. Did they get everyone? Even some that aren't on there.
Yeah, people found extra words. I love that so much. Good job with everyone's like ingenuity.
I agree. I agree. This was great. Thank you so much, Jack, for putting this together. It's always very engaging and fun. And wow, so I'm still sitting in awe. I really appreciate everything Trevor had to share. And just for a quick time check, we've got about like a little over 15 minutes. So I'm gonna kind of go through a few slides to get to sort of the meat of what I wanted to talk about. So moving into what is the Makawalu Naʻauʻao preventative curriculum. So our, on my next slide, our curricular strategic plan that we were tasked with by the ADAD, by the Alcohol, Drug, and Adult Division, Department of Health, was to create a 16-day curriculum aimed at Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander youth in middle school and high school, with the purpose and intent to prevent substance use. So one of the reasons I really thought about Trevor was because he's worked with this age group, like he shared. And this is the age group that, especially middle school, you want to reach these keiki at this age to make that profound difference. So our purpose is to equip our keiki with the knowledge of our foundation, tools to ground them in ancestral memory to withstand the onslaught of Western ways that can lead to confusion, the disconnection, and mental health issues. And our curriculum was designed using the Pilina framework and the learning tools measurement known as format, also known as Moena, which just means format in Hawaiian, but that was taken upon the University of Hawaii at Hilo has created a curriculum using Moena. And yeah, we can move on to the next slide. I shared about that. And our learning objectives for this curriculum is we want to engage our keiki. We want them equipped with that cultural knowledge so that they awaken their ancestral memories to develop strategies, right, for our life ways to be that preventative methodology. And doing that, we ask, what is cultural safety? How are we creating that cultural safety, that layer of trust for our keiki to have this foundation? They will identify their own strengths that will uplift their own wellness from a cultural perspective. Give that kuleana to that keiki to understand how to learn that learning our ways of our ancestors is the tools to withstand that onslaught of things that come at our keiki on a daily basis that have a detrimental effect on their mental, physical well-being and their mental health. We hope that by doing this, by teaching them these activities, giving them this foundation, that they'll experience that paradigm shift, you know, that foundation, so that they can ask themselves, how does my behavior and my mindset bring mana to me and honor my kupuna in the area that moves them out of disruption? So next slide. And so moving into Pelinaha. So this indigenous framework, as I shared last time, was developed in 2014 or 2012 to 2014 by the Islander Institute to address what did health mean to us as a community. But this foundation of Pelinaha is that connection to Aina, connection to community, connection to the past, present, and future, and connection to the better self. These connections of this framework is woven through all of the activities that we do, that everything that we teach is taught through these connections in some way. And multiple times they're connected to all of them at the same time, or we focus on one or the other. A lot of times they're all woven in. So when we started this Pelinaha, these were the things that we came to understand meant health to us, was to know your better self, to others to love and be loved, to understand and be understood, right? As Trevor has so eloquently shared, that gaining that trust so that the keiki knows that he seeks to understand them, and to have a pilina to place, even if that land is Henderson, Las Vegas, that they still have an understanding of a relationship to the place that they live. The beautiful thing about Hawaii Life Ways is that, yes, Hawaiians belong in Hawaii. The unfortunate reality is majority of our people now, more according to the Native Hawaiian Council for Advancement, that more of them live on the continent and abroad than they do in Hawaii. And that's very concerning. One thing that I really took away from Caroline's webinar yesterday that really was profound is you can come back. That is always the option. You can always come back. We may have to live abroad for now, but it's not forever. And so always understanding that home is Hawaii, but you can always come back. But if you live abroad, there are aspects of our culture that's universal, that whether you live in Hawaii or not, you can own these foundational tools and use them and incorporate them, that is your cultural identity, that is also the tools to help with the ways that can lead to mental health issues. So next slide. And so Pilina is prevention, as I shared, looking through wholeness. So starting off with our better selves, moving to past, present, and future. This is also the protective and resilience factors lie here, right? Lie in the tools. It's also where the disruption lies as well in our intergenerational trauma, the loss of our culture, and how to move out of that, how to move into those aspects that can bring that air of like, this is who I am, this is my identity, moving it into ceremony where they will have that connection to who they are, back to better selves. So, and moving on to format. So format here, this is a really important way to teach that it really resonates with me because I'm definitely a 1. And I will tell you now, the educational system is set up to honor the 2 and the 3 ways students learn. What Trevor shared about a lot in the curriculum and the way that they teach, he's reaching his 1s and he's reaching his 4s in terms of how students learn. And what I mean by these quadrants, so format is an open-ended learning model that offers educators, right, a method of broadening their delivery of instruction to meet these other ways that children learn. And so starting with every activity that we do, everything that we begin with an aloha circle. We even structure our webinars, if you've noticed, in this way. And as difficult it is to engage virtually, we know that we can still bring that cultural safety when we start with aloha and end with aloha. The concept of the shit sandwich, I'm going to carry that with me. That is brilliant. I love that, but it's very true that if we can start our settings, the cultural safety setting begins with the aloha circle. And in this aloha circle that I was taught, that I did with my youth that I worked in our Ehuola program at Kokua Kalihi Valley, and at Ho'olu'aina, with our Kiki, with anyone also, elderly to very young to adults, everybody would get this magic that happens when you engage in a circle. This is where you come as a cultural practitioner. I love the concepts of mayo, right? An aloha circle, you're coming as equals. There is, in any circular event, there's no beginning and there's no end. So you begin with the cultural practitioner bringing that humility. They will always begin the aloha circle. And by being vulnerable, they're allowing those in the circle to also be vulnerable, to sharing their story first, sharing who they are first and their names will break that uneasiness and allow everyone to share. In an aloha circle, the practitioner will begin. You're usually grounded, usually barefoot, as you saw in a lot of the pictures Trevor shared. In cultural settings, we want to be rooted to that earth. So we're going to be barefoot, and we're going to, and it's okay if you have on shoes too, but you're going to gather in a circle. You're going to hold hands. Pre-COVID, nowadays, we may not hold hands, but still that connection that we hold in a circle. And the practitioner is going to begin with saying, welcome. They're going to introduce the oldest person in that circle, the oldest living entity, which is the Aina. They're going to introduce the name of the Aina. They're going to introduce the wind, the name of the rain. They're going to introduce the peaks and the mauna and the names of the places they are, the Ili Aina, the Ahupuaʻa, and bringing their names to that circle. Then they're going to begin by their name, and they're asked, everyone in the circle, to bring their name, where they're from, what's your vai, what's your mauna, what is the place you call home, where did you sleep last night, what is a place that is pili to you. And then you're asked to bring your kupuna, bring somebody you want with you in this circle. And people want to bring their grandmother, they'll bring someone still alive, they'll bring someone they may never met, but their name is in the ku'e petitions, and they're always really intrigued about that particular kupuna and they want to know more. So they're going to bring that kupuna to the circle. And by doing this, we raise our vibration. And everybody, we always end our aloha circle with oli, because pule is the mana. That's what brings the sacredness. And it starts off this activity with cultural safety. So for the practitioner, there is knowledge that is needed to run these aloha circles. So that's an important component. And then as we move on into how format actually works, so I'm going to share about an actual activity, part of our curriculum that would be done using format and also using Pelinaha as the foundation. So starting off with format, our learning style characteristics of the quadrant 1. These are our imaginative learners, okay? These learners, they seek meaning. When they can personalize the information for themselves, that's when they gravitate to the knowledge, that's when they learn. They need to be involved personally, and they love to learn by listening and to stories and sharing ideas. These learners in quadrant 1, they are going to absorb reality. They perceive information concretely and they process it reflectively. They're interested in people and culture. They're divergent thinkers who believe in their own experience. They excel in viewing concrete situations from many perspectives and model themselves on those that they respect. So sorry, I can go next, to previous slide. So in this, so beginning an activity in quadrant 1, we always begin kind of in this circle. We're going to start off with grabbing them with that emotion, have them close their eyes, ask them to think about a place and describe how that place makes them feel safe. Then you're going to take them on that walk. On that walk is so crucial. Have them go outside, find a tree or somewhere peaceful to contemplate. If you're doing one-on-one, this is a great kind of open questions, to intro questions to begin with, to grab them, to grab the students that learn at this quadrant. They're going to grab them with these activities of feeling and emotion. And then you have them write down their thoughts. Like, think about it, write down what is a place that makes them feel safe. And these are the words also used as well, because that's important as well. So next slide, we can move on to the strengths and the goals. So here is the strengths of quadrant 1 is that they're innovative and they have imagination. Their goals is they want to be self-involved in the important issues. They love bringing unity to diversity, and they love to ask the question, why? Why does this happen? Then moving on to quadrant 2, quadrant 2 is our analytic learners, okay? So it's here that they're gonna wanna learn the facts. They're gonna seek the facts. They wanna know what the experts think. They form reality by learning to think through ideas. They perceive information abstractly and process it reflectively. They're less interested in people, but they're more interested in concepts and ideas. They love, they critique information and they're data collectors. They're thorough and industrious, and they'll re-examine facts if the situation perplexes them. They enjoy a traditional classroom setting of lecturer, and schools are designed for these learners. And these learners are, when you're moving them through your activity within the format system, here is where you give them that facts and the information. So where the cultural practitioner shares about the importance of place. Why is it important to think about a place that you feel safe? Then they'll, like they did in the Aloha Circle, they share the names of the Ili Aina, of the Moku. They teach them these names. I have them identify the wind that you're feeling, how pe'epe'e. In Ho'olu Aina, that's the name of that wind. Or you have Ua Kanilehua, we're sitting in Hilo. That's the name of that Ua. The names are very important to cultural identity. and learning about their place-based learning, learning that identity of the place they're in and how they're related to that. So here we'll share stories of the ridge, of the name of the cloud that hovers over the peak, right? They're walking around and they're looking at these things. They're identifying the place as an entity. And this brings that awareness of the ancient but current Ike Kupuna. And so that's where you're going to engage quadrant 2 learners, is when the practitioner shares about the Ike, gives them the facts of the place and the stories, and that's going to grab them. Moving to quadrant, the strengths and goals of quadrant 2. Thank you, Biana. Sorry, I was like, I want to get to the meat of this as well. And you have the recording and the slide deck to look at as well. I did go over some previous slides in the last webinar that we did. But for quadrant 2, we want to recognize the strengths of these learners, that creating concepts and models. We know that intellectual recognition and self-satisfaction are goals for these learners. They are smart. All children are smart, but they like being intelligent, and they recognize that as an identity of themselves. And they love to ask, what? Like, what is this? Why does it matter? You know? So those are our quadrant 2. And then moving into quadrant 3, we're going to have, and this is how we can take that activity, just a very simple Aloha Circle activity, and how to make it profound for our learners that learn best in quadrant 3. So our quadrant 3 learners, we call these our common sense learners. And these are the students that they're going to seek usability. They want to know how things work. They're interested in testing theories in ways that seem sensible. So they edit reality. They perceive information abstractly and they process it actively, using factual data to build design concepts. Traditional classrooms are also set up for these types of learners. So they give you the facts and then do the work. Learn this, use it this way. So the 2 and the 3 in our quadrant, in our formats system, really thrive in the traditional classroom settings. They need to know how things they're asked to do will help in real life. So these are, like, again, like how Trevor mentioned, the students that they are hanging on to every word. They want to know how this will apply in real life. It's very hard to BS kids, I'll tell you that. They'll see right through it. I've worked with youth for 8 years, and I will tell you that they saw, if you're inexperienced, they'll zero right in on that. And they need hands-on experiences and they enjoy problem solving. So here in our activity, they learn about the place. So now they are to take it further and they want to thought about the place. They're invited to bring their stories together as a group and work as a group to find commonalities and differences. Here you can encourage them to fast write a haiku, paint a picture together, where they're hands-on together as a group. And so this is also where, you know, you encourage them to, like, what is the story about the place you're from that you've heard? What is a mo'olelo you've heard about the place that you're from? Could be your uncle used to fish down the road at that, you know, when it once was a fish pond, but now people call it Hawaii Kai, that sort of story, you know, like take them back. And it's having, like, do they have access to this place? That local i'a, it's not there anymore, right? Like Mauna Lua Bay. And so invite them to and understand that the disconnect of that history, but how they relate to it and how there's hope in knowing these stories and how these stories are important. Growing up in Kuli'o'o, I would hear so many stories about the largest local i'a in all of the Pai'aina of Hawaii was in what was called Kuapa, and it was 580 acres. It was so big. In the 50s, 60s, we had a developer, Henry J. Kaiser, who named himself after the high school and actually after the area known as Hawaii Kai, came and developed it and was very irresponsible, destroyed the local i'a with sludge that, as I was growing up, my brother with a nonprofit called Pono Pacific went out to dig up all of this invasive limu ogo that was choking out the reef to clean it up. So these stories, it was heartbreaking, but we moved through the disruption to agency to learn what we can do to restore, what we can do to teach our keiki about once was, but we can still perpetuate that knowledge. And so that's our quadrant 3. And okay, we're at 11:31. So my apologies for going a little over. We're gonna just finish this, but if you have to leave, I invite you to do so. We will still forward you the recording, but to keep the information so that it's there in the recording, we're gonna continue. But if you have to leave, my apologies, may do so. But if you can stay on to finish so that the recording is all the way through, that is, I appreciate that. Thank you. So for our quadrant 3 learning style characteristics, yes, here is our strengths and the strengths goals and what quadrant 3 learners learn best with their strengths. So they, again, practical application of ideas. They love to bring their view of the present into line with future security. They want to know, again, how does this work? How can I make this applicable? It's also very interesting to note that the things that learner 1 in quadrant 1, how they learn through emotion, through storytelling, often frustrate quadrant 3 learners, and same vice versa, that sometimes quadrant 1, they get stuck in quadrant 3. They have a hard time moving through this. So knowing this, that you have students that learn in these ways, how to break them up, team them together, and have their strengths work with one another. And last is our quadrant 4 learners. So here we're going to close our activity that's part of the curriculum. And we are going to, at the end of the day, we close with a mahalo circle. So as we begin with aloha, we end with mahalo. We always treat everything with love and gratitude. When the practitioner invites the keiki to share their thoughts of the whole activity during the mahalo circle, and it's at this time that it's good for evaluation purposes to get this information the keiki are sharing, because that's the data. That's the data collected to see how well you have done through your activity. And then we take it further, because quadrant 4 learners, these are our dynamic learners. They want to they seek meaning. They want to know what's going to come next. They seek the hidden possibilities. They need to know what can be done with things. They learn by trial and error, through self-discovery. Kind of difficult to teach these learners. They want to go and do their own, but they enrich reality. They perceive information concretely and process it actively. And they're very adaptable to change, and they relish it. They like variety. They excel in situations calling for flexibility. They tend to take risk, and they're at peace with people, but sometimes seen as pushy. So these are the students, if you ask them to, write a paragraph, they might write you a song or a poem. They're not going to stick to the task at hand. They might take it further. So here is when we're going to have our keiki take this information, and their ha'awinas to go home and engage with their family. What is their collective mauna? What is their vai of their ohana? Invite the parents and grandparents and siblings to share stories of places significant to their ohana. So we encourage them to go home and begin this dialogue, this information. This leaves the keiki with a way to identify a place to who they are, and also who they are as a collective within their family. The quadrant 4, their strengths is in action and carrying out plans. My apologies. There we go. And here their goals is to bring the view of the past in line with future security. And they love to ask, don't you all want to know what this can become? So these are our 1s and 4s. They get lost in our traditional classroom. So the way that Trevor shared about how he learns, how he teaches, how he guides his keiki, doing the ahakane, ahawahine, these are going to grab your 1s and your 4s. Taking them outside, grounding them in aina, in aha, in piko, you're grabbing your 1s and your 4s. So culturally, way that our kupuna would teach, they would always meet all 4 of the ways students learn. So that's very important as we teach how to hold space. So next slide, please. How to hold space. So trust is key. Yeah, the practitioner needs to be knowledgeable of what they're teaching. They need to have the names and be familiar with the place-based learning, and an understanding of that spiritual connection to aina is foundational for keiki to learn their identity to place. Like Trevor has says, he makes sure that that trust is in place before he moves forward. So again, we're moving at the speed of trust. Unless trust is you know, like he said, if you don't have trust, you're not going to get very far. So moving at the speed of trust, how did these seemingly simple activities tie into prevention? Well, in the SAMHSA's definition of recovery, this activity is purpose-driven. It's one of the many pathways to find identity. It may seem simple, but there's layers that are very profound. I really like how Trevor calls it like a utopia type of living. It is where we're thinking what is the most we want for our keiki, and that's what we're going for. We're going to go for the dream. That's what I mean by living the dream, the disconnect back to agency. We want the dream, and that's what we're going to strive for. Nothing but what our kupuna left for us. So that is how it ties into prevention. And so mahalo nui for staying with me. 7 minutes past our closing, but we do want to bring to our closing protocol and also have some time if there's any questions you wanted to ask Trevor, any questions you had for me or anything you wanted to share, we can do so. Next up is our manaʻauʻao, and I'm going to give time for this. My apologies, last time we didn't have a lot of time, but we really ask that you take a moment to respond to this link here, or you can text it to the number here. And also mahalo Lilinoe, please also look at complete the survey. She put the link in the chat for the Ohana Center of Excellence. All of these links are going to be a part of, yes, here we go. So all of these links are going to be in the email that we will send out, part of our toolkits. But we invite you to also click on it now that it's in the chat. And then so mahalo Caroline. So we're going to give some time. We would love you guys to engage in the link here for the manaʻauʻao, because it creates a really cool word cloud. Yeah, trust is a huge one. You know, I think also I'm very thankful for my husband running that Lei to You, because I was like, we need to get Trevor a lei, and it couldn't be a store-bought lei. My husband loves to really lei. That's his way. He stays connected to his culture, is learning different ways to make lei. So I'm very thankful he was able to get that Lei to You, Trevor. Yes, understanding, transcend, empathy. Yes, love. Well, please continue to log in and share your manaʻo. We want to also share that this webinar will be on Hawaiʻi Train for those that require CEUs. And as you see here, we also had our 2 previous trainings with our Ulu State Disaster Response Project and our Kanilehua Native Hawaiian Cultural Intervention. Both of these are on our website. And thank you so much, Caroline, for putting the link in the chat. And so we ask that you also complete our evaluation feedback survey. We really appreciate feedback. We design our webinars around feedback. So if there's any suggestions you have or things that you want answered or questions you have, please fill out our evaluation link and we will take a look at that. And our upcoming webinars, so we've got a whole month summer, our summer series still happening. Our next one is, actually, we have one coming up tomorrow. Caroline, did you want to share a little bit about this webinar for tomorrow? May I invite you to share?
Yes, mahalo Kea. Aloha everyone. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at the acronym AANHPI and talking about data disaggregation, really focusing on the other Pacific Islanders and hoping to help folks understand who is Micronesia in the NHPI communities we serve here in Hawaii Health Systems. So if you folks are free, please come and join the discussion with us. We're really excited to hear from all of you. And I'll pass it back to Kea.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Oh, I'm excited for that webinar. Her webinars are dynamic and mind-blowingly full of very vital information. So as we begin with aloha, we end with mahalo. So I wanted to share this oli as our ending pule for our time together. This oli mahalo talks about just aloha and gratitude, and also how it says we may have to turn my back. So in Hawaiian thinking, we'd never really like to show anybody our back because it was a kind of rude. It's considered rude. But when we leave, we may have to turn our backs. And so we apologize for that. We're like, sorry, I have to show you my back. And it's with aloha that I bid you farewell. So mahalo nui. And as I close our webinar with ke kau aloha. Ke kau aloha wale maila ka uahe. Ka mauna o halili ukua. I kua aloha me ka mahalo. Aloha, aloha, Ke kau aloha wale maila ka uahe. Ka mauna o halali ukua. I kua aloha me ka mahalo. Aloha, aloha, Ke kau aloha wale maila ka uahe. Ka mauna o halali ukua. I kua aloha me ka mahalo. Aloha, aloha, Mahalo.